the course of my life, I should say. And so to come out after 30 years of interactions and be able to be a small business owner and doing good work in the community, helping young people, like I'm living like my best life, bro. Like I'm living my dream life.
Hey, that's
Like this.
beautiful to hear. That's beautiful to hear, my hey.
I'm dead.
No complaints is always the best way to live life. Just feeling blessed, like I've been talking about a lot in some of my like Instagram posts lately, is just like moving with the attitude of gratitude, and not just to do it, but like actually realizing what you have in life and just being gracious for that, and really have a really tapping into that feeling of gratitude and understanding that not everyone is in the same situation as you, and life could be way different, or it might have been way different in the past. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
you got to be grateful right now.
Absolutely.
Hey,
In the moment.
but with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the episode. I've started recording right now, so go
Okay.
ahead and for the people, introduce who you are, what you do. Just give us a little rundown of how you would describe yourself, my brother.
Absolutely. First and foremost, thank you for having me on the show. It's an honor. I'm too blessed to be stressed. I'm doing well. My name is Naeem Al-Amin. Man, even though I'm 41, I still feel like I'm this young kid from South Central Crenshaw District, LA, with potential, aspirations, vision. I think for me, though, back then, I didn't have a platform to express it. I didn't have guidance to facilitate that process for me. And I experienced a long-term instability through foster care. So, but I still feel like I'm that hopeful kid from Los Angeles. And so currently I work at UPS. I'm in Human Resources. I'm the employment supervisor for the downtown James Street facility for our twilight shift. I also am the CEO and founder of SWAGG Inc. Serve, witness, and give guidance. Inspiration never ceases.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Tell me a little bit about, but actually we'll jump in that a little bit later. See, there's so many things I want to talk to you about, right there, just with
Right.
your introduction. You covered like 3 or 4 things that I want to talk to you about, and we'll get to those throughout. But, I wanted to ask about your name. Is that your original name? Did your parents name you that? What's the inspiration or the meaning behind the name for the folks that are unaware?
So that's actually a celestial question. I don't get asked that often, but names are important. That's what we are, defined by. A culmination of our experiences, and so that's not my birth name. I was born Antoine Haverly Tingle in 2006. It was, I believe, I changed my name to Naeem Salim Al-Amin, and that had to do with the fact that I grew up in foster care. I know who my mom is. We've had a historical relationship, but I've never known who my father was. And so my mom gave me my sister's father's last name. And as I got older and pursued this journey of knowledge of self, it would become important to me that for my legacy, that we have our own last name. Because I couldn't identify with that last name because I wasn't that person's son and I had never met that individual. And as I said, I was going in the direction of knowledge of self. And so I wanted to own my name. So I changed it. And so Naeem means one that is tranquil. Uh, Al-Amin means one that is trustworthy. And so those are things that I want to embody every moment of my life experience to be peaceful and trustworthy. That's important to me, and I wanted my legacy to be founded on that trustworthiness.
That's beautiful, brother. That's beautiful. I love when thought goes into, changes people have in their life. When people change whatever it is, their name, when people change how they speak, when people change their dress, when people change their attitude of how they approach life. I love when it actually has purpose behind it. When people
Right.
add something new to their spiritual, attributes, when somebody adds something new to their physical attributes. I love when there's
Right.
purpose behind it, because that's part of their story. That helps people understand who you are when they come to speak to you. When they of course it's important to understand who we are as an individual just for
Right.
ourselves, but we live in a world where we have to interact with other humans, you know? And when we can understand and tap into another individual story, it makes like the love, the bond, the connection that much stronger. So thank you for sharing that. That's powerful.
Thank you for that. Just as
Yes, sir.
powerful.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about how we met. Do you remember?
I do. You know, we was getting ready for that old Super Bowl victory. You know, standing
Yes,
in
sir.
line.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. I just thought it was funny. It's like, I've kept my eyes on what you're doing, and I love what you're doing. And like I said, we'll get into that. But over the past few months, but then I started thinking about, I was like, man, how did I even meet bro? And so I started thinking about it.
Right.
I started thinking about it, and I was like, oh yeah. I was like, we were in line trying to get into Power and Light to go watch that Super Bowl game. And that it was interesting. I feel like I don't exactly remember exactly what we talked about, but I know we had a little connection talking about NIP because that was, obviously it was 6, 7 months later, but it was still fairly recent. It still feels fairly new. Rest in peace to the Nip the Great. But yeah, so like we had a little conversation about that, and you shared how you were from out that way. And
Right.
I had just moved back from LA, so it was just a solid little human connection there where we were able to like tap in on something that we had that was relatable. So can you talk a little bit about life growing up in South Central LA? What was that experience like? How did that shape who Naeem Al-Amin is today, right now?
Thank you for that, Carlos. And so, I'm 41 today. So thank God, all praises to the Most High for allowing me to progress through those vicissitudes without losing my life or putting myself in a position where I could never exit prison. And so, um, let me kind of answer this from a historical perspective first. As I will review my life story in my cell, I would come to understand that I was born into a system, into society that already had objects, definitions for those objects, assigned roles, and what life was going to be looking like for people of me. Excuse me, for people that look like me, people of color, African Americans or Black or whatever terminology you want to use. Um, and so it was only then could I understand that I wasn't necessarily, a felon and a drug dealer by those labels, or criminal. And so I was, born not knowing my father, placed in foster care at 6 years old. And so what that looked like for me, I was actually born in Junction City, Kansas. And so one day, regular day, I'm in the living room, my family, prepared for bed. The next morning, I'm on a plane going to Los Angeles, California. Now I'm in a house with six other dudes and this man and woman. And they're like, this is where you're living. I'm like, nobody, I wasn't able to resolve that psychologically. And so um, I didn't have anyone to put their arm around me and point things out to me in a logical manner or be concerned with what my future would look like. And so I would find that support in the area that I grew up in. And I would be with the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips. And so out of survival, I would sell drugs. I would commit robberies. Um, I would do things that I wouldn't do in a rational, if I had a safe environment to flourish out of. This wasn't something that was just in me to pursue, right? And so these are things that I had access to that I could necessitate my next day, And so, um, I just this last incarceration and me being able to review my life and be able to read literature on criminal justice reform and look at the historical legislation of America and how that focuses have been disproportionately on people of color, Black and brown, then I will be able to forgive myself and experience freedom.
That's powerful right there. That last statement right there. I was just talking about that the other day. You need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive yourself in order to progress. You cannot
Absolutely.
progress without forgiving yourself for your past experiences. And when you don't forgive yourself for your past experiences, you are unable to open that door to your future experiences. And And for you saying that, and it's powerful, because forgiving yourself does come with educating yourself. Forgiving yourself does come with investigation, self-discovery, you know, and that's
Absolutely.
exactly what you just shared right there, that you went through to get to that point where you were comfortable in understanding that it's okay to forgive yourself and now be able to move forward. So
And the moment I gave myself in prison was the moment I was inspired with SWAGG Inc. I had never had a thought about creating anything in my life. Like just nothing. I just for me, I was because I grew up in a different time. I was under the mindset of, man, I get out of prison, I'm gonna try to get on with a company, stay there 20 years, maybe I can retire, stay out of trouble, leave something for my kids, and just, I can progress through life like that. And so, soon as, I mean, literally, as soon as I forgave myself, the acronym came into my mind: serve, witness, and guide. That was the original acronym for SWAG. It had one G instead of two G's. And so, and then the ink came to me naturally. Inspiration never ceases. So I said, okay, SWAG Inc. What are we doing there? And so I said, well, it's sort of like, a writer. You only write what you're knowledgeable about, and so we're going to do criminal justice reform. Well, how are you going to do that? We're going to focus on the youth. We're going to get corporate engagement from the employer we plan to retire from, or something to that nature. And so you're going to have to connect to something. And then I knew this, but the swag part didn't sit with me. I said, serve, witness, and God. That just don't sound right. I went to sleep. I woke up the next day early for child, 4 a.m., and said, give guidance. Serve, witness, and give guidance. That's inspiration never ceases. you know, just
yes,
like that.
yes.
Yes, sir.
I love that. I love that. And I want to double back a little bit. I want to double back to young you. You know what I'm saying? I want to talk about what were some of your early interests, when you were a teenager. So of course you were in a specific, situation. You were raised under certain circumstances, but outside of that, like in your imaginary mind as a teenager, what did you want to be? What did you want to do when you grew up?
Right. And I wanted to be this is a term that I never understood, and I see it in people's bios or what have you, community developer, right? But I'm like, what is that? How you do that? And I had no one to ask that question to. And so um, I would grow into becoming an avid reader to escape my realities, whether I was incarcerated or in foster care. I just remember looking over one day and I seen a book and I picked it up and I started reading, and then I wasn't in my current situation, and it was a pause for me, and then out of that grew an affinity for language because as I would read, I would begin to realize I didn't understand words, and so then I would get a dictionary. I started writing down. Then I would gravitate into using those words in a sentence, writing those down in a sentence, and then committed it to memory by repetition. And while I'm doing these things, I'm not in my current reality, right? And so, as a reader, sports, I was good at sports early on, athletic, had tremendous ability, even played a little football. But because of my instability through foster care, I couldn't complete anything. I never experienced completion in my life until now, at 41. And man, that is very, very traumatic. It can have long-term effects, you know. And so I'm just like I said, I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be inspired with Swag Inc. To advocate for people that can't advocate for themselves, to share my story, to be a symbol of hope. To be a symbol of hope. Absolutely.
Blessings, blessings. I also want to say that you give me a lot of inspiration just based off the fact that, no disrespect, but you're almost double my age, yet you still young, fly, moving well. Like when I met you, no, for real though, when I met you,
Thank you.
you know, I wasn't thinking, we don't think about age immediately when I meet somebody. So I'm just like, oh, what's up, young fly individual, moving with peace, like with a peaceful attitude, peaceful energy. I rock with you. Yeah, go ahead and jump in line. But you feel me? But but yeah, like you move with good energy, and you're you've been through a tough life, and you're still out here fighting. You're still out here fighting for your purpose. You're still out here fighting to educate the youth. You're still out here providing. Another thing I see via your socials, providing people jobs, providing people opportunities to grow. With SWAGG INC, providing people opportunities when they leave their being incarcerated and coming out into the new world and trying to like find their way and find their footing. You're here to help. You're here to help stop the consistent what word should I use, basically abuse of minority communities, and putting these communities in situations that only lead them to a life of challenge, just a lot of challenge that wasn't there except if it was systemically put there. So you inspire me. I just want to get that out of the way. So keep doing what you do, and I know that's part of your purpose and how you move, but you do a great job at it. Tell me how, see, I didn't know about the part about you being born in Junction City, Kansas. So I find it interesting, from Junction City to LA. And when I met you, all I thought was LA. But then when I did my research on you, I saw that you had some education through K-State, and through a few other schools, a few other schools, but K-State, which is in Kansas. I was wondering how you ended up back in Kansas City or back on this side. So tell me about like that transition. How did you always feel connected to the Midwest ever since you went to LA, and like growing up, did you come back and forth, or was there just a connection in the back of your head that you knew you were going to end up back here? Can you talk a little bit about that and how you ended up back in the city and how you ended up going to K-State?
Absolutely, my pleasure. And so, I would not travel back and forth after I left at 6 years old. In fact, I wouldn't return until I was 21 years old. And so, this is very intimate. One of my friends had lost his life, um, and I felt directly responsible for it. And here's why. I he asked me for some drugs. He was uh, trying to come up. He didn't have any money, and so I had a little work at that time. And so I said, "Yeah, bro, here you can have this." I gave him 7 grams of crack cocaine, and so he went around the corner and immediately got killed. Through a drive-by. And so I went to his funeral, and I remember I seen his mom um, in the pew, and I just was like, man, I just couldn't imagine just what she was going through, and feeling like I was directly responsible for that. And so at that time, I was like, I have to leave. So it was Samaje Aubrey, his death, that propelled me to look at options outside of Los Angeles, California. And so I had a conversation with my mom, and she told me that two of our family members had graduated from K State, and that could potentially be, an option for me. And so I came to Kansas, but I didn't come for college. I came with the pack, So I brought drugs with me, and I was immediately arrested, like within 2 weeks, pulled over on the highway for speeding with drugs in the trunk. And so that was my case. I didn't refute it. It was just about time management at that point. And I had uh, 20, 20, 21 grams of weed, I believe, individually bagged up. And so they charged me with intent to sell, and I received 4 years in prison. It was my first drug offense, and I felt like that was absurd. One, um, just a lot of time for that particular offense. But in that incarceration, I wanted to do something better for myself quite naturally. I always had a desire. I always felt like I could be something, and so I started reading sociology books. And then I said, okay, well, I'm gonna get out and I'm gonna study sociology. And so that's what I did upon my release. I would enroll into Johnson Cloud County Community College, receive my associates in psychology, move on to K-State and receive a bachelor's in sociology and a bachelor's in criminology. And then something interesting happened. I couldn't get employed anywhere in reference to something that was comparable to my degree, right? I can go be a janitor somewhere and get $9 an hour, but I have 3 degrees now. I'm seeking position, financial security, and status ultimately. That comes with that. And so those doors were shut on me in Manhattan, Kansas. So I reverted back to selling narcotics, which would lead to my third trip to prison indirectly. And so my co-defendant was charged with a cocaine case, and I was arrested for conspiracy. And so I was asked to turn state evidence on him. And because I refused, the charges against him was dropped, and I was sentenced to 68 months in prison, which was very, very tough for me because my daughter was 4 years old, and she's the first person that came to my mind, and I just couldn't imagine her being 10 years old. Right? That was unbelievable to me. And I didn't think it was real. And so because it was a year investigation and they had, I wasn't on any other surveillance. I didn't have a phone with any text messages. They didn't receive any marked money. They didn't get me out of any of these kick doors that they did. And they had all these things with other people, but I wasn't a part of that. And so, man, it was a very stressful situation to be in. And so when I did arrive in prison, I had brought momentum with me into prison that I could still be great at something because I just went through an experience after getting released on bond and not being able to be in the city that I caught my case because it was a confidential informant. I was homeless in a place I had never been, didn't know anyone, didn't have any money. But nevertheless, I was managed to get employed with General Dynamics, working on defaulted student loans under the Department of Education. I would get a 2-bedroom apartment, a vehicle. I would also get accepted at KU for the Masters in Public Administration, nonprofit focus, all while fighting this case for over 13 months. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna survive this and I'm gonna be able to continue on with this life. But that wasn't what was written for me. The judge would ultimately not weigh that as heavily as this was an opportunity for me to make the right decision coming out of prison because he felt as though I was at a crossroad, which he said that I made the sentencing hard for him. Even though it was a legal situation facilitated by the police, he could have gave me substantial longer amount of time to do. And so he didn't. And so I took that energy with me into prison. And ultimately, I'm kind of skip forward, but when I would get released and I'll be back in the situation of homeless, geographically displaced, no prior relationships, I knew that I could be successful because I had just did it 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And so I knew that. And so since I knew that, I focused on that.
Man, again, you keep finishing with powerful statements. You said first off, your story is extremely inspirational already. I think a lot of people who listen to this are going to be able to connect with it because although the situation may be different, everyone faces some challenges in life. And personally, in my belief, God or whoever, depending on the type of person, whatever you believe in, but for me, God gives tests that can be handled by individuals. He'll give a hard test, a very challenging test. A prime example is for you right now. A very difficult test, but only one whose soul can handle that. And each person has different capacities. I may have not been able to handle that situation because I may have not had that capacity. God didn't grant me that capacity. It doesn't mean one is better than another. It just means God granted each individual different capacities. And yes, and for me, I'm thinking about people who are going to listen to this, and and how it may not be the exact same situation, but they can apply that to whatever extreme challenge they're facing in this current moment or will face in the future. And understanding that once you know something in your head and you commit to something in your head and you understand that you do have the capabilities, the talents, the skills, the opportunity to make something happen, no matter what situation faces you after that, you will be able to get through it. And I think that's what you were saying right there is, when you were out on bond for that time and you saw what you could do by applying yourself, by not giving up, by trusting in the process, by trusting in by trusting in God, by trusting in yourself and your soul, and just going out there and getting to it every day.
Right.
And then having to face that challenge again and go back in for 60 plus months, but understanding before you went back in that you did have that power in you to make something happen is what, like you said, helped you go in with a little bit of motivation, with a little bit of inspiration to hold you tight. I'm sure shit still got crazy. I'm sure shit still, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure shit was painful, but I'm sure there was some very difficult. I can't even imagine. Basically, I don't even want to speak on it because I can't even imagine. But you had that little inkling of understanding that you did have that capacity in you. So when you got out, here we are today having this conversation about what you're doing. Here you are today, putting in work when it comes to SWAGG INC, putting in work when it comes to UPS and helping people get positions, especially young people, young African-American kids who really, like, I know you can understand this, I know I can understand this, but may not have seen any other way if it wasn't for you helping out with those situations. If they wasn't getting jobs for this person and this person and this person, you never know that child, that youth, that teenager, you're sitting in a meeting with, trying to help get a job or teaching about opportunities that UPS has, or you never know where they were at in their life at that moment. They may have applied to 74 jobs prior to that and not got a single one. They're like, I'm gonna apply to one last one. If I don't get this, I'm resorting to what I know.
Oh man, that's facts. Preach.
Yep. And here you are, doing the work, so I just, I know it's not necessary. Of course, you're a humble individual, but I just want you to know here you are today. And I want the listeners to know here he is today after what you've heard so far of what the experiences he's gone through from childhood to mid 20s, late 20s, and here he is as a 41-year-old gentleman, still young, skin popping. You know what I'm saying? And he's out here doing good work. So just understand that once you know something, once you commit to the idea and you truthfully believe in the idea that you can, really get something done, you'll be good. But sorry, I didn't mean to go on the whole little rant. But yeah, man, I mean, there's so many questions, so many things I want to ask you. Again, sorry for the little rant there, but dive a little bit more into SWAGG INC. What is your mission statement for SWAGG INC? Like, if you were to give a rundown of what you do, on a day-to-day basis, what is that?
Absolutely. And so our mission at SWAGG INC is to promote ownership for those impacted by the criminal justice system. And so we do that by fostering a mindset of ownership under the umbrella of entrepreneurial development, also employment and non-punitive guidance. And so for SWAGG INC, what that looks like is we are in Central High School, and so we have a career mentor partnership with KCPS. The students take the SWAGG curriculum, which is essentially the employment access, the mentoring, and the entrepreneurial piece. But also we do a assessment that I developed while I was in prison. Actually, it's called I SAID. It's an acronym, one of the big acronym guys you come to find out. But individual self and identity description. So again, individual self and identity description. And so we ask questions in a formatted way to evoke the best version of that person's self out of them without them consciously knowing it, right? And then we go revisit that and we build a profile to how that will connect them to their long-term goals. And so on the entrepreneurial side for our students that want to pursue that, we can then now partnered them with Startland KC. We've been working with them. They help entrepreneurs with funding and the platform to develop as an entrepreneur with mentors and funding and different events and things of that nature. And so we've been working under the umbrella of most entrepreneurial community in America. And so these students go through 1 day pitch competitions. They build out a business plan. They do the research. They have a power meeting about it. And then they get up and pitch in front of complete strangers. And this takes trust to get up and go tell somebody what you're passionate about, what you believe in. You know, that takes tremendous trust. And so we've been able to really connect with our students on that level. And so these are cash pitches. And so they're able to receive funding that they can put into their business plan, into their home, into their bank account. We also have partnered with Community America Credit Union because we understand as we are capturing these prizes that we want to have a plan for that money. And so we have a financial workshop that we do with Community America as well. And so now all of this, of course, is being impacted by COVID, and we're doing some virtual stuff now. But that's what it looks like for our mentoring in terms of entrepreneurial development. And then the actual mentoring is, you know, texting, calling. A lot of my particular youth work with me at UPS, so I get to see them every day. But a lot of checking in, following up, making sure that, you know, they're processing the information in their social world correctly, understanding that a lot of adversity is temporary, and in that moment you have to be response able, right? And that will lead to you being responsible. And so that's something that we definitely like to communicate to our youth, because you look at this immediate situation, but in their time, you know, this is lifelong already. You know, like no, we can uh, provide a solution for this, and it will be resolved, and then we can focus on something else. You know, that type of thing.
I love it. I love it. And I think as you were mentioning, you're an acronym guy, and then like you were saying was response able and responsible, and just some of the things you were saying right there. I think it's important to realize how important language is. Implementing a
Right.
language in a process is so powerful. We see so many, you know, obviously SWAGG Inc. is doing great work. More, I'm not going to compare it, but more great work than these collegiate athletic programs. But I wanted to speak about collegiate athletic programs and how these coaches, these teams, the leadership that they hire to come on to be leaders for these young athletes really always develop a program around language, like a language program. There's language that they use specifically to help, you know, push the idea of greatness, push the idea of leadership forward, push the idea of, you know, basically being a greater version of yourself, a greater version of your team, whatever it is. It's necessary to have a language. So, you know, I think, you know, there's so many small things that you can pick out of this podcast, listeners. But one thing is, you know, don't think like certain things are weird. If you like using acronyms, use acronyms. If you like saying a certain phrase, like my new phrase right now that I like to say every day when I'm like post IG video or when I get up for work, even though I don't want to get up and go to a job that I'm not super passionate about, is I always
Right.
remind myself, I'm like, let's move with an attitude of gratitude. I say that all
Let's
the
go.
time, an attitude of gratitude. And it's important to have that language because it reinforces, you know, that mentality. It reinforces what you're working towards. It reinforces the purpose behind, you know, whatever the process you're going through is right now. So shout out to your acronyms, because those are actually very powerful for individuals who need to understand and learn via certain language styles. So that's dope.
Thank
So
you
tell
very
me,
much.
yes, sir. Tell me about how you like first like jumped in and implemented this program when you got out though. So you create swag, you create I said you create these programs that are made for good for the community, for the youth, for minority communities, for Black and brown brothers and sisters. But how do you actually implement it? Who do you hit up when you get out? Who do you call? Where do you go? Who are you getting in contact with? Talk about that.
It's a great question. And so, again, piggyback off the phrase of it's like a writer, you write what you knowledge about. And so for me, it was reentry. And so for that process, it was socially constructed by the prison administration. 2 years prior to release in the state of Kansas anyway, the prison administration is supposed to be your release plan. This entails, where you be releasing to, the support system. It's supposed to be a plan, and it's supposed to be intentional and purposeful. And so they didn't afford that to me, and they just released me homeless. And so my PO subsequently was also my unit team when I was in Lansing. Now that should be illegal because we didn't have a great relationship in prison. So what was brought to me was, well, you can be in Missouri in the daytime, but you got to sleep in Kansas at night. Sleep where? I don't know. This is her response. Um, what about employment? Well, there's some jobs posted on the bulletin board. What about have to go through this because I just left and I had been leaving historically prison, and the men in there, myself included, the one thing we would say is that, man, if we had a job prior to getting out, man, we can be really successful. And so that would resonate with me. And so I got on at UPS as a package handler, unloading trucks. And so they didn't hire me to be a social scientist with 3 degrees. My job was to unload trailers. And so because I was going through so much turmoil outside of work, that's the only place I wanted to be, was in work, because it was safe, it was secure, I was generating revenue, and I wasn't homeless during those hours. I was like everybody else at work. And so um, when the opportunity presented itself, I got promoted to operational supervisor. And at that time, I knew that I was in management, and I knew that I could seek other management positions, and I knew that human resource would be a pathway to the corporate engagement piece that I was seeking. And so I expressed interest in the HR position, became available. I was supported. As soon as I got into the HR position, um, two things happened. I would submit my business plan to my manager just to test the waters, to see where we would stand, just to know that, this is my vision. This is what I want UPS to support. It would be good for the community. I didn't know how they would look at that. And so I was willing to risk my new position on it. And so I did. And so he came back to me. He said, "This is amazing. We want to support you in any way that we can. We want you to focus on hiring people that have been impacted by the criminal justice system, to advocate for them, to share your story. We want to see other people do what you've been able to do. And so we support you 100%. Also, Eric Day is his name, my area HR manager at UPS, Eric Day, would then give me a laptop and also a token so I could work remotely. And I'm only a part-time supervisor. These are tools for full-time staff. The second thing, while I was in prison, I read a book by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. And the major premise of that book resonated with me for the rest of my life. And that is, and a little feedback on Carter G. Woodson, he's the founder of Black History Month, first Black History Week. But nevertheless, in this piece, he describes that people of color, African Americans, that we look to the Western we look to the Western doctrine on education as a pathway to being financially successful, and then we also flee to those suburban areas, and thereby default, we take our talents, resources, innovation, finances out of our community, and this is a part of that debilitating status that we're in now, our decaying system that we're in. And so I said, man, I was on that same trajectory. Even though I had these degrees, it wasn't really about going back to community and doing no work. It was just securing stability for me and my family and getting away from where I grew up out of, right? Because this is what we are taught. Right? We got to leave the hood, got to get out of here. That's success, leaving the hood. For me, success is empowering myself and then coming back and empowering someone else in the hood, right? And so when I received those tools, I went to East High School. I just popped up on the doorstep, said, hey, we can offer positions. And then SWAG Inc. would be introduced. And so then it would become kind of a dual setting. You know, on Friday, I would show up as the HR supervisor for UPS and do an orientation and hire on the spot. Monday, I would double back and return as the CEO of SWAG Inc. and work with their at-risk youth as they term them. And so that will grow into me meeting Principal Anthony Madry of Central High School, and this is the individual that made, I won't say made, but allowed for SWAG Inc. to do work, right? Because before then it was just it was an idea, it was written on paper, and I was communicating it. I was going through entrepreneurial programs, but we weren't doing any work, right? And so I had an opportunity to meet him at a Mentoring Success event, and he loved everything that we talked about. And so he said, you know, we can get to work Monday. You come talk to our students, because I was already an approved mentor through KCPS, so that helped. And so, you know, Monday now I'm talking to a student. You know, now we're doing work. You know, and out of that we were able to connect with Startland, because now we have students. You know, and then that would lead to the Community America piece, and that will lead to everything really that we're doing. You know, Principal Anthony Madry would open up Central High School, and he opened it up to me in such a way that was unbelievable. And so when I arrived to the school, he asked me to wait in his office, and he's on his walkie-talkie calling people, hey, we got this. He's on the phone, get down here, we have a meeting group. And I'm thinking, wow, somebody important about to show up, you know, and they all come in his office, they all stand behind his desk, and they're looking at me, and they're like, he's here, this is him. And I was like, what? You know, like, what's going on here? You know, and so that love, that compassion, that belief, that reciprocity, this is what I call KC, reciprocity KC, man. It's a beautiful city, beautiful people, culture is low to the ground. You can have a conversation between two strangers like we had, and some beautiful can come out of that. And that's not the story everywhere.
I love it. I love it. I love it. That's powerful. Shout out to the principal of Central.
Yes, sir.
Shout out to our brother over there.
Yes, sir.
So what's let's talk about like the next 5 years or so, or 3 or 5 years. Where do you foresee, you know, SWAG Inc. going? What are some of your plans for the next few years? If that's too far ahead, then just anything in the future. What are some of the plans for SWAG Inc.?
Absolutely. Well, that's a good demarcation to start. And so as we've gotten further in this business model, we are looking at a reentry university, right? And we want to be national because of our partnership with UPS. It actually makes us global. We can hire or offer employment throughout the nation, which I've been doing right now via my phone. All I have to do is send a referral via email, and we can get that done. And so the reentry university, what does that look like? And also mentoring space. It's a building on 39th and Woodlawn, old movie theater. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, right off of 71 Highway. And so we would like that to be a creative space where we can generate revenue, export products, bring that money back to KCMO, a safe place for our students to grow and develop in. And we can also then grow that community around us and the people that are in that community around us. And we can rally around, you know, creating opportunities for others, because it's going to ultimately, you know, lead to you being successful as well.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I love it. I love it. Tell me a little bit about, you know, how, you know, I'm sure this individual inspired you a little bit, you know, being from that area, being from you know, going in the direction you're going in. I know you were doing this before he passed and everything, but I'm just saying, what are some ways that Nipsey Hussle inspired you? What are some, you know, I don't know if the correct word is ideology. What are some thoughts or quotes he had that you know really hold true to your heart?
So that's a great question. And so Nipsey and I, so recall earlier I said I left when I was 21, and so came to Kansas. That was around '01 or so. And so Nipsey and I will miss each other, but his day ones from the turf is my A ones. You know, I grew up with them. And so we had that relationship through that manner. And so I was able to be introduced to him. And so we had a conversation, and out of that conversation, he would let me know that what was important to him is ownership. And the way that he described that was off of the desire of Rick Ross to sign Nipsey. And, everybody was kind of like, man, why hasn't this guy signed this contract? Is he crazy? And I just happened to have an opportunity to ask him that. And, he told me that for him, his responsibility was remain patient and be the master of his destiny. And, ownership was important to him. And so I would have an opportunity to dwell on that over 5 years that I was incarcerated. And so it became very important to me once I started really working on my business plan to pull back up on Nipsey and to show him how his conversation inspired me to create a nonprofit and also a for-profit business, because I was able to see him evolve over the course of my 5 year sentence. Um, and it was just inspirational because I know the elements, the environment, the adversities, the battles with self, the battles with change that he had to overcome to reach the best version of himself. And so what I seen in Nipsey was the principle of alchemy, turning the base lead into gold. And so um, I never had a passion for entrepreneurship because I never knew what that was until I would be.
That's a powerful statement right there. Continue going, but that's powerful. Go ahead.
And so my objective was to approach Nipsey and to present this to Nipsey. I had no other, it was tunnel vision because I wanted it to be two from the hood, would create these different changes for self and for other people. And so I didn't have an opportunity to do that. And in fact, I went to LA when I got released, and I consciously refused to go see him because I wasn't where I thought I needed to be to present my case to him, right? And so my homie was hitting me like, yeah, he's performing at V-Live, we can pull up after hours. And I was like, no, I'm good, I'm away. And unfortunately, may peace and blessings be upon him and his family. He would transition to that next life before I could present my business plan to him.
Yeah. I think one of the powerful things that you shared right there is, besides the whole story being powerful itself, but now one thing that stood out to me is you never had a passion for entrepreneurship because you never knew what it was. And as simple as that sounds, I'm gonna repeat it again. He never had a passion for entrepreneurship because he never knew what it was. And I think, especially in our communities, this is something that is real. We don't have parents, uncles, cousins. We don't we don't have a history of parents, uncles, and cousins that have ownership over a company, who are big investment guys, who are big music label executives that own things. We don't hear about ownership.
Right.
We don't hear about entrepreneurship except in a specific way. But even in that, it's not defined under the umbrella of entrepreneurship to help us understand that we can take that same concept, that same way of moving, that same business plan, quote unquote, and apply it to something a little bit more constructive.
Exactly.
But we never were presented that umbrella. And that's why it's so important what you're doing. That's why Nipsey's legacy is so powerful and so important. What you're doing is so important. And preaching about ownership, preaching about entrepreneurship, presenting these in inner city schools where people are facing the same challenges that you face, facing the same challenges that Nip faced, and
Right.
will face those challenges without guidance if individuals like yourself or if legacies like Nip aren't left behind or put in front of their eyes. So again, I'm going to repeat, he never had a passion for entrepreneurship because he was never educated about it. And this is why being educated about entrepreneurship, being educated about ownership, being educated about, you know, whatever you want to call it, your third eye or spirituality or understanding self, or this is why education about these things, conversations about these things are so powerful, so necessary in regards to the growth of Black and brown communities to get out of the situations we are in right now. So I just wanted to thank you for pointing that out and sharing that, even though you may not have done that intentionally, or maybe you did do it intentionally. That is something powerful that people need to hear. And, you know, if you're listening to this right now, and this is your first introduction to entrepreneurship, or all you see is a whole bunch of, and you know, nowadays it's become cool to put entrepreneurship in your bio, you know, but the problem is, the missing piece is they're still not being educated about it. You know what I'm saying? We're still, you know, it's a cool word, but it's not being implemented in a constructive, systemic, you know, process that helps uplift an entire community of you know, people in our communities and educate, you know, systems in school, systems at the Boys and Girls Club, systems, you know, maybe at small scale they're being implemented, but we need as many people being educated about this and as many people preaching this and understanding the power and importance of entrepreneurship, the power and importance of ownership inside of entrepreneurship. And these conversations are just important. So, so let's see, we're just going, man. We over here, you sharing great stories. I'm going on rants. time is flying us, but I'm gonna ask you a few more questions. You kind of touched on it before, but I want you to retouch on it again. Can you please define what you mean by community, reciprocity, and perpetuity?
Absolutely. Now that's an intriguing question. One that made me, in fact, think about why that stood out to you, even. And so, um, can I ask that prior to me answering it?
Yeah. So when I was doing my you know, research, and honestly, I saw it before. You know, it goes with your post on social. You've mentioned it before, but also doing my research. When I look at it, I'm like, first off, it sounds dumb me saying this, but like it just sounded cool. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like community, reciprocity, and perpetuity. My understanding of perpetuity is consistent and in a lot of amounts of, you know, perpetual, like continuing to come back, you know, constant flows, like, you know, the flow goes down but it comes right back, you know, perpetuity. And reciprocity, I can be 100% honest, know the definition of reciprocity, but to me, when I hear that word, when I'm reading it in a sentence, my context clues normally lead to freedom, you know, like upliftment. So when I was reading it, I was like, community, reciprocity, and perpetuity. I don't know what that means, but what it sounds like is the promotion of a healthy community constantly and consistently. So I was like, this sounds cool, but I don't understand exactly what it means. So I want to know what it means, you know, coming from the mouth of who I heard it from first. So that's kind of my thought process and why I decided to add that in here as one of the questions, is because I'm like, that sounds powerful, but what does it mean?
That's dope. That's dope. And so thank you. And so let's start off with reciprocity. So for other people that may not be familiar with that word right off the bat, and so reciprocity is simply the exchanging of items for mutual benefit. So you're right, and that freedom is freedom of selfishness. And so I'm a firm believer that the universe minus the self is plus one. That's from James Allen. And so community reciprocity and perpetuity. For me, that would be a play off of the word CRIP. I'm an acronym guy, remember? And so CRIP, CRIP. And so historically, CRIP means, in its historical connotation, community revolution in progress. And so, as me growing up in that genre of time, where the advent of cocaine separated us as a people, and then CRIP lost its definition, and so did blood. And so blood was initially better look out or die. in reference to the police militarizing our communities. And so it was two stewards that were acting as vanguards for our people. Interjection of crack cocaine that no longer exists. And so I said, how can I say that in a different way? Because that may sound inflammatory to some people. I don't know. So I just ran it through my mind, and I came up with community reciprocity and perpetuity, and that is the best way that we can ensure that humanity will advance, right? And so that's cool for the community, but as we also need to be empowered to have ownership, to have a stake in our current affairs, to be relevant. And how do we do that? And so business-led opportunities, organizational development, that will become the acronym for BLOOD.
Man. Yo, so, nah, man, like I have a lot of good interviewees that come on here. You know, I've enjoyed all of my interviews that I've had, but for some reason this one feels way more powerful. You know, no disrespect to my last interviews, but I'm feeling this. I'm feeling this interview, and I talk about in a lot of my interviews because I feel like I never get enough questions off about a part two. But this is an absolute must demand for a part two. You know, it's not it's not an option, my brother. You have to come on again. But
my pleasure, because I feel
yeah,
like I can give more.
Absolutely. This is a powerful conversation, and this is something that's touching me. This is something that's inspiring me right now. And a lot of my conversations make me feel good, but it's difficult for a lot of my conversations to truly inspire something within me or be educated about something that I wasn't priorly already understood. So, and I don't mean that in any egotistical way, because I'm always learning, but what I will say is that I'm just feeling a lot of good energy, a lot of uplifting energy from this conversation. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. And we're not going to wrap it up quite yet, but I just wanted to share that before I ask these last few questions. But we're definitely going to have to do a part two. My listeners are used to me saying that a lot, but understand that he will be back on here, ladies and gentlemen, because I feel like this conversation is good for a lot of us to hear. A lot of the individuals who I know are part of my listening community, no disrespect to them, but are ignorant on a lot of these conversations that we're talking about, whether it's mass incarceration, whether it's the implementation of crack cocaine to break up our communities, whether it's the acronyms you're sharing, whether it's about entrepreneurship or ownership and the power that it holds when it comes to our community. So I think that this is a very educational conversation, inspiring conversation that will cause other individuals to go do some more research. And so, yeah, anyways, I like I said, I go on these rants and then I'm like, damn, there goes 12 minutes.
I love it.
But so the last few questions I have are, what companies or individuals are you looking to partner with in the coming months or years when it comes to any of the work you're doing? It can be through SWAGG Inc. It can just be, some personal interest. Are there any companies that stand out in the social work that they're doing and the social justice work that they're doing that inspire you to want to connect with whoever's leading that movement at other companies, whether it's a big company like Nike or something, or whether it's a small company, local? Is there anybody that you're interested in partnering with?
Absolutely, Colas. And so let me answer that layered. And so in terms of a person, SWAGG Inc., myself, we would love to work with Hill Harper. Okay. And so during my incarceration, I had an opportunity to read letters to an incarcerated brother. And at that time, I wasn't really familiar with Hill Harper as I will become to know him through that literature. I just, he's an actor. I didn't know that he had been to college, that he was a writer, that he was an advocate. There was so many more things to him that I wasn't aware of. And so when I read the book, it allowed me to prepare for my release and organizing the way that would look like through his idea of flow charts. And so I actually have flow chart. This was he wanted you to write where you were at in prison, your goals in prison, and then another flow chart of what it looked like for you when you were released from prison. And so I did that. And so you can really see this, but this is my flow chart in prison. And so, but it goes from the bottom up, right? And so we have me in prison, spiritual guidance, live healthy, complete self-help programs, read, write, think critically, study Arabic language, draft incorporation of bylaws for SWAGG Inc., draft business plan for FAMBAM, draft the self-curriculum, successful endeavors leveling failure, and the life curriculum, living in feudal environments. These are actually two curriculums we teach in our partnership with KCPS. Complete the first draft of the book I wrote. Focus on writing Heal Harper. Give charity, knowledge, energy, and love, and trust the process. And that's the way that I'm gonna leave this prison.
Man, that's beautiful.
By doing those things. This hung on my prison wall. Still got my prison tape on there.
Man. Man.
And so this is me out of prison. This is what it's gonna look like for me.
Yes, sir. I love that flow chart. I love that idea as well.
You know, so yeah, and so right here is consistent. I gotta leave out trusting the process, right? And so right here, I gotta begin there, trusting in the process, which is my business plan, you know. And so out of that would, you know, I would say involve myself in my support system, become a part of the Islamic community, actively participate in fatherhood, secure adequate employment, adequate housing, apply back to KU, which I thought I wanted to do. And on this side, we have the master's program, create SWAGG Inc., advocate for criminal justice reform, establish relationship with other organizations, establish halfway houses for youth. And so this is in prison. This is lofty goals for somebody that is sitting in a prison cell and their value, whatever they have, probably is worth 10 cents, you know,
Man.
total.
Man.
You know.
Man. And that's what I'm like, you know, it's powerful for me to see, because I'm struggling to even see how someone can have that mindset or these goals, you know, locked in a small cell, you know, not knowing, especially, yeah, go ahead, actually, what were you about to say?
I was seeing Nipsey. I was seeing Nipsey on TV. I was seeing him doing interviews. I was fresh off a conversation with him that I would replay in my head. That was just like a burning circle. And, you know, I said, man, he did it, I can do it. Like, we're literally from the same place. You know, there's no excuse for me. I have to own the bad choices I've made. I have to own that this is going to require some uncomfortableness. I'm going to have to own that this is temporary, you know, and that you have a plan. And so I'm a firm believer that the universe conspires with those that pursue their personal legend. I'm a firm believer ever since I read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist. That was also perpetuating energy. I had never heard that phrase, the universe conspires with those that pursue their personal legend. And through that phrase of personal legend and the way that he describes it in the book, you have a ultimate best self out there that is obtainable. And this is mathematically true if you add your worst self, right? This is a mathematical fact. You know? So yeah, this is no cap, right?
As they say.
Right, simple mathematics. And so that would transpire into me developing a formula of thinking 1 + 1 = 3. Okay, I never heard that. That makes no sense. 1 + 1 is 2. Well, two constructs are always going to produce a variable, right? So 1 + 1 is 3. It's always going to have a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to match up my 1 and 1s to produce the most ideal consequence. And so that's what I was focused on.
Man, I love it. I love it. Sheesh. Y'all better be listening. Y'all better replay this right now. Y'all better run it back. You know what I'm saying? Y'all better run that back. All right. You got your last 2 questions, brother. All right. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes, sir.
First off, all your answers have been fabulous, inspiring, and great. You do a really good job communicating. Your story is inspiring. Your mission that you're on right now is inspiring. And you know, I just pray that more individuals can come in contact with you and be able to interview you for their platforms to provide your story to other individuals as well. Because, you know, I only have access to so many people, but I hope that other people can tap in with you and really talk to you about your story and your mission, because I think it's powerful and will inspire a lot of individuals. So, all right. I did want to ask you this question because this is a question I have for myself, and I think it's a question for individuals who don't have any connection to anybody that's been incarcerated, don't have any connection to, um, you know, understanding or knowing about mass incarceration until recently, until, you know, social media is like blowing these conversations up. You know, so I wanted to ask, what does prison reform look like to you? And how can we as a community, and I mean that in a sense of worldwide or nationwide, white, black, Mexican, Asian, how can we as a community of human beings contribute to help in that process? So what does prison reform look like to you, and what are some ways, it can be one way, multiple ways, that individuals like myself or other people in the community can help push that forward?
Absolutely. So this is an inspiring question. So criminal justice reform, that looks like to me, um, it ends where it starts at. And so that's going to be in the legislature. And I think that there's been a disconnect of grooming our youth to become lawyers, to be ensconced in the law, to look at policy. And so if we're not engaged, someone else is engaged. And so I think that that part is where SWAG comes in, and other organizations and other people. We have to promote that amongst our youth, let them know that we can create change through the legislature. And so, but we have to become active participants in that process. And, you know, so for those that, for law school, that is for, then we need to make sure, you know, we're collectively doing that. And so that's something that I would like to see, like a big law school fund for our youth that are interested in law. I want to learn more about law and how that connects to their lives. And so, because at this time, as one of the questions you pointed out, um, these criminal injustices are racialized social control over a demographic of people that have particularly been black and brown. And so even in Missouri, you have a situation where there's 19,000 returning citizens. That comes out to 1,583 people per month. 44% of those will return within the first year. Um, and so that's ridiculous. And so I think that the reform is in making prison specific to its purpose, and moving away from the prison industrial complex in terms of monetizing freedom, or excuse me, lack of freedom. And so moving in that direction as well. And so I see that what we would like to do is match up our 3-year model against the state 3-year model of when people being released from prison will return between the first and the third year, with the first year being the highest. Well, we want to come in and juxtaposition our program and say it'll look like this from the first year to the third year, and see that our numbers will be better, right? And so we can support other organizations. We can look at our perspectives first and foremost, listen to people and their stories and how this environment impacts them, right? Because we're not impacted the same way by the environment. We don't experience the same things. We don't have access to the same things. We're not growing up under a veil of perceived incivility, right? Where we look out into our environment and we align that with the best version of ourselves, and we're coming up short because there's nothing to align nothing with. How you align a brick wall with graffiti and bullet holes in it with being something great, when
Mm.
in other environments you have monuments and landmarks and you have energy to do this, right? That's called competitive advantage, you know, the races. So I think for us, that's what criminal justice reform looks like, starting in the legislature, getting our youth involved in the law early, Also organizations coming in to support returning citizens, the community, because I look at it this way. I would rather offer you an opportunity than meet you in a dark alley with a gun. Right? I would rather that would be better for you, for me, and for humanity. So
Straight
why
up.
not do
Man,
that?
that's a great point. I never heard it put like that. That's a great point. I like
All
that.
right.
I like that. Straight up. That's real. That's real. Boom. And just like that, you came with the fire. The final question for you, brother, is if you died tomorrow, which hopefully you do not, but as we know, we got to move with an attitude of gratitude because we are not in complete control. We are in control of our lives, but not in complete control. So we need to be grateful every day for every opportunity we have to take a breath and put in effect change in this world while we have time. So if tomorrow was your last day, brother, what would you want your legacy to be, and how would you like to be remembered?
Absolutely. And so I would want my legacy to be that of charity that extends beyond the grave, meaning that I'm no longer breathing, but the things that I've instructed on this earth are people are still benefiting from. And so that's what I like to see my legacy. That's what SWAGG Inc. represents to me. It's a symbol of ownership, of growth, of development, of mercy, of reciprocity, of patience. Not everyone gets to sit up and tell their story after a 30-year interaction with the streets, right? And so um, I definitely want to be remembered as a servant leader, someone that, for all intended purposes, could have took their knowledge, skill sets, and abilities and focused on self, but elected to give back because that's what's right.
I love it. That's powerful. Again, one last time, I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for the efforts that you're putting each and every day to serve humanity, to advance our civilization forward, not only for the Black and Brown community, but through your efforts will also affect change throughout the community worldwide. So understand that every day that you wake up and you put work towards what you're doing right now, that you're placing a brick on the building that will serve not just our community, but will serve society as a whole, humanity as a whole, in whatever way that may be. I want you to remember that right now at 41, you're still popping, you're still living life, and you still have double the amount of years to keep putting forth the work and effort that you're doing right now. So I pray that you have the same health that you have right now. I pray that you have the same strength, the same motivation, inspiration, and feeling of purpose to do what you are doing right now continuously for the next 50 years. Again, thank you for
Love,
your
bro.
time, brother.
That's love, Carlos. We appreciate you giving us this platform to share our story. That's a confirmation that the universe conspires with those that pursue their personal legend. I believe that your time is valuable, and that for you to express interest in what we're doing and want to highlight that, I mean, it speaks volumes to where we want to be ultimately. And so we're grateful and we look forward to tuning in and listening to other stories in the future. And hopefully we can, connect with listeners and do work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please share with them where they can find you on social or a website or an email. Go ahead and share that with them before we hop off.
Absolutely. And so IG is going to be swaginc.org1, SWAGGINC.org, the number one. Also, we will be doing a hiring event. Swag Inc. will have UPS and Goodwill. There, we will be at Equal Minded Cafe and Event Center, 4327 Troost Ave, KC Mo, September 27th, September 21st, 2020, at noon. And so the Goodwill has an amazing grant right now. They have 30 positions that they want to offer to people that are currently on probation and parole. And they also offer upskilling. And so if you wanted to get your skill set sharpened, they will finance that piece as well. And so So we can definitely look forward to connecting us on that day, 9/21/20 at 12 p.m. Equal Minded Cafe and Event Center.
Blessings, blessings. Thank you for your time again, brother. I hope you have a blessed evening.
Thank you. Thank you. Peace and blessings.
Yes, sir. And the Culture Talks podcast listeners, thank you for tapping in. Please leave a review, comment, and enjoy the remainder of your evening. Peace.
Peace.